I don't know who needs to hear this, but I want you to know that you are enough. I feel like I've struggled with self-acceptance for a lot of my life, and I'm not exactly sure why that is. But when I was a kid, I was very innocent and carefree and sort of out there, you know. Some people found it annoying, and I would ask a lot of questions, and I was very secure in myself and accepted that way that I was. But it seemed like I brought that energy around, and I was just myself and open and vulnerable, and people didn't respond that well. Maybe they found me annoying or something, or maybe they didn't like me asking all these questions about different things because I was just such a curious kid. I just wanted to know all about the world. But for whatever reason, people didn't respond the best way, and I started to realize that if I wanted to fit in, if I wanted to have good relationships and not be seen as a pest, I sort of needed to moderate who I was and change a little bit. And I think that was the first point in my life where I began going down this cycle of not feeling like who I was, my innate value and personality was fitting this mold of society or was enough or was okay. You know, I started to modulate myself to the people I was around and change. And it began then. And I think going back, if I would tell myself, you know, you are enough. You are worth loving yourself and accepting yourself unconditionally. And any quirks you have, any character traits or personality traits that people find annoying or, you know, are not that comfortable with, like, obviously, you need to do things that people are comfortable with, but you shouldn't change yourself for people who are just easily disturbed by you or easily annoyed or have some sort of a lack of patience. I think that our society almost conditions everyone to be a certain way. I went from being this very open, like emotional, you know, just carefree individual to being sort of the kind of person who hardened my heart and put up walls and started to feel like I needed to act more like the people around me. It's like the adults found it annoying that I wasn't, you know, the way other adults were, and so I irritated them in some way. And I think, you know, later in life, I've just become this sort of person where I'm always picking at myself. I'm always pointing out the issues and tearing down things and telling myself to build up bigger and better and just improve upon myself in every possible way. And as good as that, you know, ability to work on yourself is, I think there's a fine line where you need to be cognizant of who you are as an individual and not trying to tear away things that are just part of who you are. You know, I think that in a way, we need to be able to accept ourselves and have this level of unconditional acceptance before we can really begin the journey of becoming the best version of who we might be. You know, I think that people kind of have this idea that to be a stoic, you have to act cold and, you know, hard and don't react to events emotionally. They think that a stoic person is someone who's like, you know, doesn't smile or laugh when things are funny, you know, they don't react at all. But really, the idea of stoicism is just that you don't let negative emotions affect you as much because you'd rather try and see the light and try and focus more on the bright side because obviously, you know, the darkness, the negative parts of reality speak for themselves. You know, they don't need to be elucidated, they're just there and they're so clear and present in all our lives. But when I first discovered this specific philosophy, I started to take it on as, you know, just hardening myself and just being a different type of person, being this soft spoken, quiet person in the corner of the room, you know? Like, I don't know. Maybe it was just sort of the role models I had in my life online and different things, but I started to go in kind of a negative direction. And when I realized this and I realized that hardening myself and putting up these walls wasn't actually making me happier or more fulfilled, I started to do the inverse. I started to realize, when was I the happiest in my life? Like, when did I genuinely truly feel like I was in a place where I had meaning and the things I did brought me value and I enjoyed, you know, being alive and being happy and experiencing the most? Because obviously, you know, I've had an incredible life and I've had a lot of enjoyable experiences, but there's this attitude of having a constant state of joy that we have when we're kids, and that starts to fade away, and now it feels almost conditional. You know, most of the time, I'm not necessarily happy or unhappy, I'm just in this sort of baseline, like neutral state of existence. But as a kid, it seems like everything fills you with wonder and joy. And when I realized this, I started trying to actually tear down those walls and starting to let that version of myself who I was as a child come back forth and say, I don't care how the world responds to me. I don't care if people are annoyed by me or think that I'm over the top or too expressive or, laugh a weird way or any of these things. Because honestly, just being myself and being vulnerable feels so much better. It's like we sort of try to grow up and become different than we were when we were a kid, but really, we need to let that child within us grow up naturally, instead of trying to force this process and emulate those around us. We need to mature and become wise with age. And I think as I've started to tear down these walls, I've realized that I'm more emotionally, you know, mature. I'm more intelligent. Everything about me feels like it's improving as I just let this version of myself actually come forward and accept myself. It's like you are who you are, and it's not even necessarily something in your control. We are different people. We have different interests. Certain things are really enjoyable and interesting to one person, and they might not be to another. And certain things you can become obsessed with because you're specifically just designed this way for whatever reason. And I have some friends who are interested in different things than me, like really obsessed with them, and they're always going on and talking about them. And sometimes I find it a little bit annoying because I don't really resonate it, you know, on that same level they do. Like, I don't find cars as interesting as this one friend does. Maybe I don't find rock climbing as interesting as this other friend does. But I started to realize that they don't need to change for anyone else. Like, if they're genuinely interested in those things, then me as their friend, I should just be accepting of who they are and think it's awesome that they're so willing to express themselves. I feel like I used to be that sort of person where I was willing to express how I feel about things, but it seemed like people gave me bad reactions, and so I kind of closed up, and I feel like I never want to show any of myself. I never want to talk about things I care about. I never want to be vulnerable and show who I am. I'd rather present nothing so there's nothing for the world to attack or to criticize. But there's certain things that I'm really passionate about, just like my friends. I really love language learning. It's something that, it's just a small thing that, like, it's not something I necessarily want to dedicate my whole life to, and not everyone understands it or really likes it as much as I do. But I love just the whole idea of languages, learning different languages, being able to speak in different languages, all of the science behind it. I'll sit and watch like 3 hour long podcasts with like different linguists and things, and that's just something I love and I could talk about for hours. And it's really nice when you actually have friends who, even if they don't care about the same things you do, even if they don't have that same burning passion, that same love for that thing, they can still sit down and give you the courtesy of talking about it. I think I didn't realize at the time, but maybe these people in my life, like, just weren't the right people to be around, and so I felt like I had to modulate myself for them to be more accepting, but really maybe they just weren't accepting of themselves, and so they let out their insecurities on me and made me feel like I had to change for them. And truly, you want to be so open that even if you get attacked, you're okay with that. It's like the ego in a way is developed to defend itself. Like we have these vulnerabilities and insecurities, and that develops an ego. Like we pick at other people for these things. We're hurt, we've been hurt, and so we attack others by having this guard up. But if you're actually able to cultivate that inner strength to accept yourself and have that level of love and be vulnerable and put yourself out there as your true real self and not feel the need to defend it, not feel the need to, have these giant walls. That takes a lot of strength, and it's not something easy, but I think genuinely this process of becoming this version of yourself that is very just self-assured and accepting and recognizing of itself that it is enough, that version of yourself is going to be the most happy and most fulfilled. And it's a gradual process, like letting go of that ego, letting go of the need to defend yourself, letting go of the need to like fight for what you think you are is not an easy thing. Like all these different philosophical and religious teachers through history have talked about the ego and how you go through the process of working on that. And it's definitely not some simple process that begins, but it's something that when you make the conscious decision to embark upon and chip away at it every day, you'll start to see the progress in your own life, and you'll start to feel yourself come into who you're meant to be. It's like, in a way, you have to see yourself as your own best friend, someone you have a relationship with, someone you care about and you want to see succeed. and someone who you want to see be the most true version of themselves, who doesn't have to pretend to be something they're not. It's like if you have a really good friend and they invite you to hang out with this other group of friends that they're close with you don't know that well. And you show up and like he's kind of talking with you on the way there, and you know this friend really well, you know how he acts, his mannerisms and things. And then you see how he reacts with his friend group, and it's almost like he's suddenly a different person, and it feels just disingenuous, and you kind of feel sad a little bit because you're like, huh, like, can he not be his true self around these people? Or is he not his true self around me? Like, I think we don't even realize it, but we naturally just put on masks everywhere we go. I think it's easier to sort of just fit into a social mold and change yourself a little bit depending on where you're going and who you're interacting with. And it helps with our ego. It helps us feel like we're not, as different from other people. There's not as much to criticize. It's almost like an armor we put up. It's like whether we realize it or not, it's this underlying like psychological and biological like programming we've developed probably throughout our evolution of some kind, and it's made to like defend us. Like it's made so that we feel like we're not being looked differently upon by the group, and that we're more likely to stay a part of the society and survive in a way. And so it feels like the ego is very strong and built within each of us, but also each other's egos are really what cause problems. So the reality is that all like bias towards negativity and positivity comes from that same source. And so not only is accepting yourself important, in terms of being your most genuine self and improving your relationships, but your own happiness and your own joy in that moment will come from those things. Like, you don't realize how nice it feels to actually just like let go of all of your apprehensions and just be your most authentic self, and just see how other people react to that, and to be able to build up that you know that confidence in yourself, that even if you are being authentic and people kind of pick at that a little bit because you don't have an ego defending you, you're not wearing a mask. If you are self-assured enough and accepting enough of yourself that you don't mind, then you're going to be infinitely more happy than all the people you spend your time with. And I think if, you go down this path, and if you're blessed, you might find people that reciprocate that are suddenly like, wow, I've worn a mask with you for years, but because you've shown me the vulnerability to take off yours and be your like true self, I'm willing to do the same, and now we can have a real relationship. I've had friends for years where it stayed very surface level, and I think it was just because neither of us was really willing to give up that, little bit of security. Like none of us was willing to be very vulnerable and be authentic and take off the mask. But it just takes someone being that different, someone showing up and saying, hey man, like, I know you as a person, even if I haven't seen, every aspect of your personality, even if I haven't spent that much time with you, I have enough faith in you that if I open up to you and show something I care about and be a more authentic version of myself, that you will respond to that in the right way, and that you will be accepting of me, and we can have a deeper, more personal relationship where we can actually feel like we see each other, on the same level. And, if you do that and they're not capable of having that sort of relationship, and they like respond badly, or they like are put off by you taking off the mask and acting differently than they thought you were, maybe that's not the sort of friend you want in your life. And maybe these are some questions you need to start asking. But genuinely, really, no matter what your circumstances, no matter how you might perceive yourself, whatever you've gone through in your life, I think it's worth realizing that each of us is a completely unique, perfect individual in a way. Whether you're spiritual or religious at all, the reality is no one else is like you. And who's to say if anyone else is better or worse? There's just an infinite uniqueness. It's like no two snowflakes are the same. Is one snowflake better than the other, or is the uniqueness of each one the perfection of its design? You are enough, and you deserve to be yourself. You don't have to fit into society or fit this mold of who everyone else is and how they act. So try being more honest and see where it gets you. It won't be an easy process, but I promise it'll make you happier.